All right. Who's ready for a twin story? It's been a hot minute since we've done twins, and I love interviewing twin moms. This story was very special to my heart because she also had a heart condition, and I developed a heart condition in my own pregnancy. And so I love kind of tackling cardiac conditions in pregnancy. And she achieved, well, I'm not even going to tell you. Let's just say she achieved her dream birth with twins. All right. Are you ready? Let's get into it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Heids. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them, and you, deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. So let's say you're pregnant. That's why you're listening to the Birth Story podcast, and you're preparing for a hospital birth that's upcoming. And of course, this podcast gives you tons of free information, right? But do you really understand the stages of labor? How to know when you're in labor? What if you have to have an induction? What about a cesarean section? What about all of the decisions that you have to make once you get to the hospital? So you get there and then they put you in triage. Birth Story Academy walks you through all the things that happen, like that rapid fire with monitoring and blood work and questions and IV ports. And do you want an epidural? I don't know. Do you? In Birth Story Academy, we literally break down all of those decisions. Pros, cons, risks, benefits, intuition. And we get into it. We make birth plans, we do birth visions, we listen to birth affirmations and parenting affirmations. And at the end of it, you know exactly what's going to happen when you go into labor and when you get to the hospital. What's going to happen after you give birth, newborn care preferences, how to take care of your baby. I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're not in Birth Story Academy, what's your plan? I want you to come join me in Birth Story Academy and let me walk you through all of the decisions that you have to make if you're having a hospital birth, and how to have body autonomy and how to have informed consent and informed refusal. I'm going to teach you and your partner, if you have one, everything that you need to know about birthing in a hospital so that you can walk in that door with some swagger, with some confidence, wash that anxiety away because you learned everything you needed to learn in Birth Story Academy and you are ready to crush that birth. Okay, let's do it. And let's get to this episode. Hey, Laura, welcome to the Birth Story podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
I know we've been planning this for a very long time. And in the intro, you guys, I alluded to the fact that we're going to be talking about heart conditions and twin births and triple feeding. So we have so much to learn from you today. Where are you coming to us from? Where are you recording?
So I'm originally from the Chicago area, but I've been living in Grand Rapids, Michigan for the last 10 years.
Beautiful. What's your favorite part about Michigan?
Oh my gosh, I love the landscape. The lake is right there. There's just so much to do outdoors, and yeah.
Yeah. I have had a couple of clients that were from the Grand Rapids area, and then one that was from Mackinac Island. And I didn't know
Yes.
you
Oh,
could
I
be
love
from
Mackinac Island.
Mackinac. I thought that was just a place people vacationed to.
Yes.
But apparently you can be from there too. So, well, tell me about finding out that you were pregnant with twins. Was this a fertility journey? What did that whole thing look like for you?
So my husband and I got married in 2020. So we had a COVID wedding. And we decided to wait a year to try to get pregnant because we were going to do our reception a year later when things were a little bit more open because we didn't have a reception for our original wedding. So we started trying right after that reception and we got pregnant that first month. So it was a surprise.
Okay. And when you say like trying, did you even track your cycle or were you just like, we're going to just like not use protection and see what happens?
Yeah, so I've been off birth control for a year and have been tracking my cycle, on an app with, like, my temperature and everything, so I've been tracking for a year,
Okay. So you
so
knew when you were ovulating. It wasn't like,
yes.
woohoo, we had sex tonight kind of thing. It was intentional.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that helps in getting pregnant the first time often, right? So,
Yeah.
when I first talked to my OBGYN about family planning before I ever knew I was going to have a fertility journey, he said the number one reason that people don't get pregnant is because they're not having sex enough and at the right time. And I was like, the right time, you know? I was like, oh, yeah, that ovulation thing.
Yeah, we
Important
called it
part of it.
sex month, so
Yes. Oh my gosh. See? It's so good. And we honor that some of you listening to this podcast are had a long fertility journey, kind of like I did. And then others we get pregnant accidentally. And then sometimes we get pregnant planned right away. So, Laura, one of the things we chatted about you guys before we started recording was we said everyone has a hard, right? And
Mhm.
some people's hard is their fertility journey. And then some people's hard is finding out they're carrying twins and that they have to triple feed after getting
Mhm.
pregnant right away. So,
Mhm.
all right. So you find out you're pregnant, but how did you find out it was twins? Like, when did that go down?
So, okay, I didn't know that you don't go in for an ultrasound until you're, like, 12 weeks. That's so long. Um But I had, like, a phone appointment at, like, 8 or 9 weeks. I don't know if that was a COVID thing or if that's pretty normal that, like, your first appointment is over the phone.
I would
But on
say
this
that's a
phone
COVID thing, right? Most
okay.
people go for a confirmation appointment in person between 6 to 12 weeks. I mean,
Okay,
my first confirmation appointment with ultrasound was at 6 weeks. So, I
okay.
mean, I would say a lot of things have changed with COVID.
Yeah, yeah, so my first appointment was just over the phone, just kinda going over history and everything. So, yeah, that was, like, right around 8 or 9 weeks, and I told them I had this heart condition that I was born with. It's called Wolff-Parkinson's-White syndrome. I have an extra electrical pathway in my heart. And when I told them that, they're like, "Oh, we're going to be referring you to MFM, maternal fetal medicine, just to get you checked out. It's probably all fine, but we're going to refer you there. And so, in order to do this referral, you should come in for a dating ultrasound." So, they're like, "How about you come in tomorrow?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's like 5 weeks early, earlier than I thought for this ultrasound." So we go in the next day for the ultrasound. My husband met me there, and we walk in. We sit down. The first thing my husband says is, "We're shooting for twins." And I just reached over and slapped his leg and I was like, "Don't put that into the universe. Like the universe is gonna hear you." And so
The universe had
she
already spoken, but
I know. So he started with an external ultrasound, and I was so nervous for this ultrasound. I mean, the little stick tells you you're pregnant, but I don't know. I needed to see a baby to
yeah.
believe it. So I was so nervous. So they did this external ultrasound and they couldn't, she's like, "Well, we're having trouble, getting a good picture. So we're going to do an internal one instead." So I do an internal one and my husband noticed it first. But yeah, they do internal ultrasound and the baby pops up and it's moving around. So the limbs are moving. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, there's a baby in there and it's moving already." And then my husband said that they moved the wand for the internal ultrasound somewhere else. And he's like, "I know from video games, if you move the controller, you see something different." And so he saw them move it and saw another baby. And I thought I was looking at the same baby. I was just in shock that I was pregnant. There was a baby in there and it was moving. But yeah, they moved the wand and he saw another baby and he goes, "Are there 2 in there?" And the ultrasound tech goes, "Well," and then I say, "What the?" And I
Yeah.
swear, like the F. And I just kept saying the F word the whole rest of the ultrasound, and my husband was just speechless. So yeah, there were 2 babies in there. They're di twins, so they have separate sacs, separate placentas.
And with
Yeah.
die, does that mean they're fraternal?
There's a small chance they could be identical, but they're most likely fraternal.
Okay. I figured with separate sacs and separate placentas.
Mhm.
It's actually surprising to me that they could potentially be identical. But so yours are
Mhm.
fraternal?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
you said this was around 8 or 9 weeks. So what did the dating
Mhm.
ultrasound put you at?
Like 8 it was 8 or 9 weeks, the same.
Okay. I didn't know if you were like 8 weeks, 2 days, like if you knew exactly or
Oh,
something.
no.
No. Okay. It's the things that we remember about pregnancy, like, some things stick in. So it was around 8 or
Yes.
9 weeks.
Mhm.
It is amazing how much you can see early on. Um,
Yes.
it's when I went in for my first ultrasound at 6 weeks. And I still have a picture of his name's Max, but my little Max at the time. And he looked like a little like fish guppy, like swimming
Yeah.
around in there, like with a heartbeat. And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's a real thing in there. It's crazy. And then at 8 or 9 weeks, yeah, their limbs are showing more and they're moving around. You're like,
Mhm.
oh, this is wild. So
Mhm.
I just can't imagine this moment, right? Like I've interviewed lots of twin moms, but I'm like, I just like you said you're saying the F word and then what do you do? Do you just leave and just say like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" I'm sure you had so many questions. So how did the next
I
couple of weeks
did.
go?
So actually, I mean, we were so excited, but my like my first 2 thoughts was I actually had to mourn, like, not being a family of 3 and, like, not
Okay.
having just 1 baby to love on. Like, I had
Yep.
to wrap my head around, like, I'm never gonna have that experience of, like, just 1 baby in a family of 3. So I had to
Yep.
mourn that a little bit. And then my, like, other thought right away was I'm risking out of midwifery care, like, that's it. So I had already found, like, a midwife group and, like, was hoping for, like, unmedicated vaginal birth and I figured I wasn't quite comfortable with like a home birth or a birth center birth just because I had this heart condition and it's my first pregnancy. And so, but I wanted to be like as natural as possible. So I was like, oh gosh, there goes my dream birth.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in my city, in Charlotte, North Carolina, you would absolutely not risk out of midwifery care with twins. Is it because you had
Hmm.
two risk factors with Wolf, Parkinson, White, and twins? Or is it just the midwives in your area don't follow twin deliveries?
Yeah, it's that I actually met with a midwife right afterwards anyways, and she was like, let me see what I can do. She's like, I feel like we're just still a few years out from that. So the midwife I met with tried to still have me under her care and they ended up saying no. So it's just,
Oh, well,
yeah, a little too far out.
listen, but then if you're listening to this podcast, you guys ask, advocate. You can call out
Hmm.
Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, they're doing this at Novant Hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. Why not here? Right.
Hmm.
There are some stipulations I will say in my area. Like there is an OB that's basically like standing outside the door, like ready to step in at
Hmm.
any moment. And then when you go to deliver in my area, they do request. Nothing is required. Say I am very clear
Hmm.
about this in the podcast. Nothing is required. You can consent to absolutely nothing, but it is recommended that you deliver baby A in the operating room, and
Hmm.
which an OB is also in that presence, but like the midwife is
Hmm.
still doing the delivery. And if all that goes well and baby B's head down, then they move you back to your labor room to deliver baby B out of the operating room. So
Hmm.
shout out Grand Rapids, Michigan. time to time to get with midwifery care delivering twins. Anyway, but so mourning that, I get it. I get it.
I did find a midwife group that had like some OBs that oversaw, like they were part of the midwife group.
Yeah.
And so I ended up seeing an OB through there. So
Okay.
she was very, she was a former doula. She was very midwife minded OB. So I definitely did my research in finding an OB that would do some of those more midwife type of things.
Okay, so what brought you to wanting to deliver unmedicated and with a midwife? It's not for everybody. So what put that on your heart?
Oh my gosh, I've just been obsessed with birth forever. I've listened to birth podcasts for years and years and years, and I'm just so fascinated by like the human body just knowing what to do. And my mom had her babies unmedicated, and I don't know, I felt like I would be more in control with of my body not having any interventions. So to me, that was more comfortable. And a lot of some of the podcasts I listened to would describe like labor as, pain is your body saying something's wrong. And in labor, like that pain isn't anything wrong. It's helpful. It's helping your baby come out. And so I felt confident that that mindset could help me do it.
Yeah, it's so true. I actually had a birth a couple of days ago, and the birthing person was sitting on the toilet and she was really fighting it. And the toilet's like usually a great place to labor. And
Hmm.
like kind of like the nurse and stuff, everybody was kind of like pressuring her to be there. And I finally asked her, I said, is it hard to be on the toilet? Like it's hard work? Or does it feel like a sense of wrongness? And she was like, "No, it feels wrong." And I was like, "Then stand up right now. Then your baby is not positioned in a way in
Hmm.
which you're ready to be on the toilet." So it is so true what you said, Laura, about like your body just knowing, even in labor, what the sensations
Hmm.
are, what's normal, what's not normal, and how to move your body out of the things in which there may still be a feeling that something's wrong.
Hmm.
It's as simple as just moving what you're doing. So
Hmm.
I love that you were called to that. I always say I was called to that too. I'm a doula. And then I got a big old epidural at 2 centimeters dilated. So I am curious to see the rest of your story and how this plays out.
Yeah.
How did you plan for twins in your pregnancy?
So I found as many twin podcasts as I could.
What are they?
Um,
What are they? What does everyone need to be listening to?
oh gosh. I mean the Birth Hour podcast has some twins ones if you go back in the history. Your podcast had some twin ones. I listened to all those. And then I read the book When You're Expecting Twins, Triplets, or Quads, and that was really helpful in kind of distinguishing how a single pregnancy is different than a multiples pregnancy. And the delivery, how the delivery can be different too. There's just a lot of different ways delivery can go with multiple. I mean, there is with a single too, but
Mhm.
it's just a little bit more complicated, maybe.
Yeah, I
Also,
actually follow there's another podcast that I like and I love Mommy Labor Nurse. And she has like twin stories as a nurse where like the mom did not know she was pregnant with
gosh.
twins. And that like they're looking for the placenta to deliver. And she's like, that feels really not like a
Oh my gosh, I can't
placenta, you
imagine.
know? So, I can't even imagine back in the day, before these ultrasounds and things like that.
Hmm.
So you had a chance to listen to these podcasts and read a book
Hmm.
or two. Um,
I took Birth Story Academy.
Thank you. So I was wondering about that because clearly Birth Story Academy is focused on hospital-based birth, but it's not
Hmm.
specific to delivering singles or delivering multiples. Like it's just
Hmm.
pretty generic, I would say, about hospital policies and procedures, the stages of labor. Do
Hmm.
you feel like it was helpful as a twin mom?
I did. I wanted to be really, I knew C-section was such a high possibility. And I also knew like baby A could be born vaginally and then B could be a C-section. So I felt like being really knowledgeable about the OR and things that could happen in the OR. Like you said, well, I found an OB that was very more midwife minded, but she was great in like going over all the options with me. And our original plan was to deliver not in the OR. She was okay with letting me deliver in a room as long as baby A was head down.
Okay.
Baby B could be either direction. Um, but I still wanted to be prepared for delivering in an OR. So
Yeah.
yeah, I felt like just knowing all the options of how delivery could go was helpful because there were so many options for how twin delivery could happen. And then my were just really great on filling me in on all the different scenarios.
It is overwhelming the amount of decisions that we have to make.
Mhm.
So, trying to make some of those before you go into labor
Yeah.
is really helpful. Did you take any other birth courses?
Nope.
No? Okay. I wasn't sure. Some people take like their hospital tour class or something like that.
Yeah, I had a
Or
doula, so met with her and
yeah, I was
yeah.
going to say a lot of education comes from the doulas. How did you
Yes.
find your doula?
Just looked them up in our area and interviewed a few and found it's a pair that work together and we just felt like they were our best friends and
Yeah. I
so
I feel like it's like dating. You just kind of know instantly when it's like
mhm.
both directions, right? Like Colin and I will hang up and we're like, "Oh my god, we really want to work with them." Like I feel like it's such a good fit, you know? And then
Yeah.
other times, like I can see it like but we're not even hanging up on the Zoom and they're like, "Okay, you're hired." So,
Yeah. And one of
um
my doulas has twins of her own, so that was important too, that
oh,
there's
yeah.
twin experience in there.
Yeah, that's a really good connection to make.
Mhm.
I would say like you're not maybe going to find a ton of doulas that have twins, but twin experience. So the
Mhm.
fact that like this person had both is really
Yeah.
very cool. So,
Yeah.
so how did your pregnancy go with Wolf Parkinson White? And can you describe out like I understand what Wolf Parkinson White is. It
Mhm.
impacts individuals in my family, and I have an ex-boyfriend who I actually had to like race to the emergency room with while
Oh my gosh. Okay.
he had an ablation done. It was
Mhm.
a workout one day and his heart rate just didn't come down. That extra
Mm,
pathway was
mhm.
activated. He was having prolonged tachycardia and they just literally went in and zapped it. But can you talk to the audience about Wolf Parkinson White and like cardiac conditions and what it's like to like have a cardiac condition when becoming pregnant?
Yeah, so I actually, had an ablation done also, but it didn't work. They couldn't zap it, and so I still have the condition, but they did test that extra electrical pathway, and it does fine. So I just live with this condition, and it doesn't really affect anything. It just is what it is. Um, but being pregnant, you have so much more blood flow throughout your body, especially with multiples. And so my heart condition was definitely like my palpitations happened so much more throughout pregnancy. So they did have me put on a heart monitor, like a 48-hour heart monitor, just to track to make sure the palpitations were normal. And then I knew that during labor, I'd be hooked up to a heart monitor. And what I found interesting is that other areas in the hospital have wireless heart monitors, but
Yeah.
not the delivery floor. And I was so glad I asked ahead of time because I didn't, I mean, it wasn't the answer I wanted, and there was really no advocating. It is what it is. But I knew going in, like, okay, I'm going to be hooked up to a monitor. There's going to be like, I knew what to expect, and that was helpful so that when, when I was in labor, I wasn't frustrated by this thing that was happening because I knew ahead of time kind of what
Yeah.
to expect.
We see that in our area too, the like wired monitors for cardiac in labor and delivery. I'm not exactly sure
Hmm.
why. Because if you go over to the cardiac floor, you see everybody with their monitors on. They're just like walking around having a party, you know?
Yes, I know. I'm like, I feel like labor should definitely have wireless ones, but
Right. They're,
I was already hooked up to monitor the baby's heart rate, so I was like,
yeah. What's one
what's some
more?
more wires, I guess.
Yeah. What Laura is talking about, you guys, is that is the crux of it. Your blood flow is significantly increased. And so heart conditions can become exacerbated or they can rise to the
Yeah.
surface. one of the things that
Mhm.
Laura and I had connected on like DMs or whatever, because I was really wanting to highlight cardiac conditions. I think I had like posted like some Instagrams of me wearing my like Holter monitor. I
Mhm.
developed a heart condition in pregnancy. Probably had it my whole entire life.
Mhm.
It's just an arrhythmia, which is just my heart has an irregular rhythm. And when I was pregnant and there was like this increased blood flow, I could feel all the time what Laura was talking about, these palpitations. It would feel like my heart would stop and then skip a beat and then
Mhm.
restart
Yes,
over and over and
exactly.
over again. And I kept thinking, I'm dying. What's going on? And it took a long time to get a diagnosis because then I would get to the ER and the episode would be over. And they're like,
Mhm.
we don't know what you're talking about. All right, it's fine. So tell me about what that felt like when you said you just kind of glossed over it like you've had it your whole life, but you're like, tell me about what it feels like so that people could understand those palpitations or that rhythm. Like, what are they monitoring you for?
I mean, you described it well. It's like my heart would be beating and then it would stop and then it would like beat really hard again. Sometimes it would just go like but like it just beat really fast.
Yeah.
But I had been used I mean, I've had this my whole life, so I was so used to it. And like I said, my OB was just so great at just communicating with me throughout my pregnancy. And so she had said, like, this is probably going to get worse. And we'll just keep it, keep monitoring it. And so, yeah, it didn't worry me throughout
Yeah.
pregnancy.
Do you get runs of tachycardia where your heart rate just goes up and stays up if that extra electrical pathway is activated?
Not for longer than like a second or two.
Okay, so just quick little runs. So
Yeah.
mostly premature ventricle contractions or premature atrial contractions. Do you have both? Top of the heart,
No
bottom of
idea.
the heart? No, who
I have
knows?
no
Okay.
idea.
I know. Listen, Laura, I know more than I should know about cardiac conditions. It affects like my
Hmm.
entire family, I swear. My brother-in-law has Wolf Parkinson White also. So, um, well, I think it's really important that if you're listening and you're feeling your heart flutter or stop or skip a beat, like I know that feels really scary. And they're in the off chance it could be very serious, but it's most likely a rhythm condition and very easily treated with just rest, breathing, patience. It
Hmm.
just eventually will go back into rhythm. Electrolytes, hydration,
Hmm.
all those types of things. So, but they were monitoring you, Laura, to make sure that your heart stayed
Hmm.
in a regular, I will say, air quote, regular, irregular rhythm.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. It's funny that I was referred to MFM so that they could monitor just monitor my heart and just make sure everything checked out okay. We found out we're having twins, and they're like, "Okay, well, now you're really going to MFM."
Now you're really going like triple reason. Did you take a cardiac
Uh-huh.
medicine like a calcium channel blocker or beta blocker?
No, they had talked about it if it started to interfere with my life or it was getting like worrisome for me. But it never got to the point where it was interfering with anything. So
Yeah.
to me, the risks of taking the medicine was, yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. So here you are, you're pregnant with twins. MFM is like clearing
Hmm.
you from a cardiac perspective,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And now we're
Hmm.
just focused on like the twin thing. I love that you found an OB that was like, as long as baby A is head down, right?
Yeah.
Like, I could go on a million tangents on like, why can't we just deliver baby's breech? But whatever. Listen to my episode on Breach Without
Hmm.
Borders. Um, was that a stressful thing for you, or were you just like, whatever happens, happens? Or were you like really wanting baby A to be head down?
Well, so at around 28 weeks, baby B started measuring much bigger than baby A. Baby
Okay.
A was never measuring small, like what they would say is small. But oh my gosh, baby B just like took off. I mean, was like 80th, 90th percentile all the time. And A would always stick around more like 50 or 40. And that gap just kept growing. So that was definitely something that they're keeping an eye on. And actually, that difference in size ended up changing our birth plan. So our OB originally said baby A just had to be head down, But towards the end, when baby B was just so much bigger, she said that baby B actually had to be head down too, because baby A would not pave the way for baby B to come out anymore. And with baby B being so big, there's just a bigger risk of baby B getting stuck, or of the cord prolapse risk was higher. There are just more risks with baby B being bigger. Now, if A was bigger, that wouldn't have mattered. But since A was lower and B was up higher, yeah, that changed our birth plan. I also had a birth in an OR. They had changed that too.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard just having my birth plan kind of be changed, thrown around. We did schedule a C-section date. I was due May 6th. I wasn't going to go till May though.
Yeah.
We scheduled a C-section for April 22nd because of the size difference. And then also at my 33-week appointment, they were both transverse. So then at that point, they're like, okay, well, we're definitely going to schedule a C-section just in case. So I was just I mean, we talked a lot about like, well, do you want A to come out vaginally and then B be a C-section? Like, because that's a very real possibility that's going to happen. And then if B is a C-section, if it's an emergency, we might have to put you out and put you under. And so like, maybe we'll just do a C-section then. So I know I'm awake and it's not an emergency. And so that was really hard trying to weigh what did I want for my birth and what was I going to make a risky choice then? Because it would not have been as risky to just be like, let's do a C-section. But I just really wanted a vaginal birth. And so then we actually did decide to do an epidural, to plan for an epidural, because if B was going to be a C-section and we had an epidural at least placed, even if it wasn't like turned on, they could maybe turn it on quick and then do B as a C-section with my epidural on. There were just so many options. It was a lot because there were just so many different ways that the birth could go. But it was helpful being informed of all the different ways it could go. Like I felt better going into it, just knowing these are all different options. But yeah, it was hard to make choices.
Yeah. I have never had an anesthesiologist offer to place an epidural and not turn it on. And so I just
Hmm.
learned something from you, Laura. And I think that's a really great suggestion. I'm not a lot. I had 3 twin births last year. Okay. So it's not like I do like a ton of twin births,
Hmm.
but 2 to 4 a year I support. And yeah, that's never come up. It's usually, do we schedule the C-section
Hmm.
or do we go for the unmedicated, knowing that there's a possibility we might be put to
Hmm.
sleep because there's no
Hmm.
epidural in place? Or do we just have an epidural, which increases our chances of having a C-section? It's really
Hmm.
hard to make that decision. I think
Hmm.
I can't wait to hear what you actually did, but what a cool plan to like place an epidural and then not use it.
Hmm.
I think that that's kind of brilliant. I'm going to run with that as the next twin delivery I have. Um, you mentioned transverse at 33 weeks. I just want the audience to know
Yeah.
that means sideways, you guys. So
Yes.
neither head
They're
up.
like bunk beds.
Yes, exactly. So were their heads both together or were their heads
Yes.
opposite? Their heads were together.
Yes, baby B was always trying to get as close to baby A the entire pregnancy. Poor baby A
Oh.
was a little squished in the corner, and we didn't find out the sexes
I
ahead
was
of time.
wondering
So,
because you just kept saying A and B. So I was like,
yes,
ooh, it must have been a surprise with the
it
sexes.
was.
Now, because, you can have a discrepancy between A and B just based on sex, right? Like males just tend to be bigger than females in
Hmm.
utero and at birth. Um, so did they ever find like a medical or clinical reason for the discrepancy?
No, it was not like twin to twin transfusion because they didn't share a placenta.
Mm-hmm.
They had separate placentas. So, no, they just said like they're just siblings. Like fraternal twins are literally just siblings born at the same time. There's no other difference.
Yeah.
So they're like, not all babies are born, like not all siblings are born the same size. And so it could just be two different babies just doing their own thing. My body could have just been feeding one more than the other for whatever reason.
Yeah.
um, yeah, but they didn't know for sure. But it wasn't, they said it would only be an issue if A was getting to be too small, and A was never too
Okay.
small. B was just massive.
Massive. Okay, so no small for gestational age or intrauterine
No,
growth restriction. What about some of the other
no.
scary things that we hear about with HELP syndrome or preeclampsia or gestational hypertension, gestational diabetes? These are all things that you're in an increased risk of developing with
Yeah.
multiples. Did you have any of those occur?
My blood pressure was always borderline. I'd go in and it'd be high, and then they'd take it again and it was normal. And the next time it was just back and forth between high and normal. So they just monitored it really closely. I had to take my blood pressure at home and keep track of it and send it into my OB's office. So just something I got tested for preeclampsia a lot, but never got to that point.
Okay. So you've kind of walked us through like these ultrasounds, right? And
Hmm.
like their positioning and like all
Hmm.
these decisions that your provider is asking you to
Yeah.
make. And honestly, I'm so glad now that you were taking Birth Story Academy because I at least know I'm walking you through like vaginal exams and IV ports and what all the different
Hmm.
monitoring and tests are and pros and cons and risks and benefits and all that. Did you have a time period where you were like, hello, doctor. This is my birth plan. And like, I know we have a cesarean scheduled and a cesarean plan, but did
Hmm.
you have a plan for an induction or a spontaneous labor?
Yeah. I mean, I think I communicated my plan from the very beginning with her.
Okay. So everyone was on the same page. Like
Yes.
you were hopefully going to go into spontaneous labor and both babies
Yes.
at this point needed to be head down because of the size
Both needed to
discrepancy.
be. Yes.
When did you find out that they were both head down?
So 33-week appointment, they're transverse. At this point in my pregnancy, I had appointments every week. So 33, they're transverse. 34-week, I had my GBS test, and when she went to do that test, she's like, "Can I check you while I'm doing this?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine." Gave her permission, and she during her check, she's like, "Oh, I feel a head." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, someone's head down! Like A must be head down." So she checked, I was 2 centimeters, 60% effaced at 34 weeks. So
Wow.
they went ahead and gave me the steroid shot that day because they're like, this could be nothing. You could be like this for a while, or this could mean like, they're coming soon and you're 34 weeks. So they gave me that steroid shot. And then she did like a quick ultrasound. She was like, grabbed the midwife and was like, get an ultrasound in here. And she checked and they were both head down. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you.
Yes.
So then the following week at 35 weeks, I had an appointment on a Friday. I'm a teacher. It's the first day of my spring break. I told my babies, you guys need to stay in there for my spring break because I want to do laundry. I need to do this and this and this. I had no plans for my spring break, but like get my house ready for them to come. So you can maybe see where this is going.
Yep.
So I go to my appointment at 35 weeks. They do an ultrasound, and you talked about like remembering dates, like the gestational dates in your memory. I remember this one. They were doing the ultrasound, and they did baby A's abdomen reading, and I saw on the screen like gestational age for this reading 28 weeks, and I was like, oh, like I'm 35 weeks, and her abdomen's reading 28 weeks. Like, they're not gonna like that. I was at the MFM for this ultrasound, and like, they're not gonna like that. I just remember thinking that. I saw that date, like, stuck out in my mind. So I met with a doctor afterwards, and he was like, "Yeah, so baby A has not grown." So I was having appointments every week, but ultrasounds every other week. So he was like, "Baby A hasn't grown from 33 to 35 weeks, and actually baby A's abdomen shrunk, like the measurement shrunk."
Mhm.
Um, so he's like, I think it's time to talk about getting them out. He's like, at this point, I don't think waiting 2 more weeks to check another ultrasound is going to be helpful. You're already 35 weeks. I think baby A is going to do better outside the womb than like keeping baby A in. And baby B was like still like 90th percentile, like
Doing
doing great in
great.
there.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just take one out? Let the other
I
one
know,
finish
right?
cooking.
Think of my best then.
Yes.
um,
Um,
it's not an emergency, but let's talk about getting him out. So I'm like, okay, like maybe we'll come back Monday for an induction. And he's like, how about like 8 p.m. tonight? Like tonight? You said it wasn't an emergency. He's like, well, you don't have to go to the ER right now. You can go home first for a little while. It's like 1 p.m. when I had my appointment. So yeah, oh my gosh, that was so hard to hear. I was not ready for them to be born. I don't know why. I thought as a twin mom, they'd be in there till 38 weeks, but
I
I
was
was
going to
not
say
ready. I wanted,
35 is so good, Laura. That's so good.
yeah, yeah. And they were both measuring good weights. And that's why he's like, we should do this induction now. They both are head down. They both look great. No one's in distress. Baby A is just showing some signs of maybe starting to not grow, but everything else looked great. So he's like, I think it's time. So yeah, we went home, got some dinner, packed as best we could, and then headed back to the hospital at 8 p.m. to start an induction.
Now, when she did her vaginal exam, she felt the head.
Hmm.
What were you having any symptoms? Like, were you having Braxton
Mm-mm.
Hicks? Were you
Oh,
waddling?
I had Braxton Hicks from like, I don't even know, 20 weeks on, 28 weeks on. I was having
Okay.
them like my
Okay.
whole pregnancy.
I was gonna say if the head's right there, then that means like very low. I can imagine like it would have been hard to walk. like,
I
you
felt
know.
like it was hard to walk anyway. I didn't know any different. This was my first
Yeah.
pregnancy, so I had
Mhm.
nothing to compare it to, but I don't know. I loved being pregnant. That was another thing. I was like mourning not being pregnant anymore because I loved it so much. And I know that's
Oh.
not everyone's story. I feel very lucky that pregnancy was pretty easy for me.
Yeah, I feel like it's like 50% of everyone's story. Like half of everyone hates being pregnant. And then the
Mhm.
other half are like, it's the most beautiful I ever felt, you know?
Yes.
It's like so
Yes.
lovely. Before we go on to the birth, I just wanted to clarify for the audience, ultrasounds every other week are because it's really hard from a science or data perspective to
Mhm.
compare ultrasounds shorter than 14 days apart. So,
Mhm.
like, the data just wouldn't really be accurate. So, that's like a sign. They can do an ultrasound sooner, but like, if we're measuring abdominal circumference, which is
Yeah.
what you were talking about, the AC, then it's really recommended every 2 weeks to do those
Yeah, they
ultrasounds.
said that like their growth is not like a line, like a straight line. It's like no
Hmm.
growth, no growth, 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 like growth, no growth. It's
Yeah.
just not. Yeah, I didn't know
Mhm.
that.
It looks more like a heartbeat than linear,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know, type of
Mhm.
thing. So, all right. So you're 35 weeks, which I think is amazing, but it's
Mhm.
your spring break. And, if you're 60% effaced and 2 centimeters dilated, your cervix was pretty ripe and your Bishop score, which they would have given you, would have been pretty high. And
Mhm.
so the Bishop score is what the medical providers will use to kind of determine, well, it's one of the things they use to determine what type of induction to do. Cervical
Mhm.
ripening with a balloon, prostaglandins like Cytotec or Cervidil,
Mhm.
Pitocin, breaking water. Did you have the opportunity to have a discussion about these things, or were they like, this is how we're going to do your induction?
They told me how they were going to do the induction, and I called my OB and just kind of ran everything by her, and she was like, "Yep, that's what I would do. Sounds good." And um, yeah, because the OB and MFM kind of were working together, but I trusted my OB so much, and so I always checked in with her. So having her give me the okay, like made it okay for me.
Okay. So you get there that
Hmm.
night. And what did they
Yes.
choose to start with?
So they started with Cervidil. So
Okay.
they got that. We got there at 8. Got that all set up. Um, when they put the Cervidil in, I was 3 centimeters and 70% effaced, and a -2 station when they put the Cervidil in. And that was around 10 p.m. by the time they got it in.
So you had already made progress,
Yes,
essentially.
yeah, from the week before. Yeah,
Yeah, you had
I'd
moved
already
from
made
two
progress.
centimeters dilated, 60% effaced,
Hmm.
to 3 centimeters dilated,
3.
70% effaced. Yeah.
Yes, in a week.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they put that in at 10. They got my heart rate monitor set up. They got the 2 baby heart rate monitors, they're to monitor their heart rates set up. And then they're like, "All right, get some sleep. We'll see you at." Our plan was that they'd come back around 7, take the Cervidil out. My OB was clear. I could eat a big breakfast then, and then they would start Pitocin after that. So that was our plan. Um,
Ooh,
so they leave. My husband puts on The Hobbit, which is great music. So it's a nice, relaxing
it
movie to
is.
watch. And then tried to sleep. My husband passed out immediately. Um, yeah, tried to sleep, but the nurse came in about every 30 minutes to redo the monitors for the heart rates. The two babies had very similar heart rates my whole pregnancy. And so they kept coming in being like, we're picking up the same heart rate. And so she's like, don't wake up, but like move over and move your belly this way. But like, go back to sleep. I'm like, I can't sleep if you're like moving these monitors around. So from 10 to 3, it was about every 30 minutes they came in to move those monitors around to try to pick up 2 separate heart rates. So tried to sleep here and there, but it was hard. And then at 3, the nurse came back in and she, like woke me up. She's like, so it's showing your contractions are happening every 1 to 2 minutes. Like, are you feeling them? And at that point, ever since I put the Cervidil in, I was feeling some cramping and maybe some warmth, but I could definitely sleep through it. And I don't know, to me, they weren't coming in patterns or waves. Like I couldn't tell. So I was told her like, no, I told her that. And she's like, well, we called your OB and like, we want these contractions to slow down. Like this is these contractions are happening too fast, which I'm still a little confused on why that was a problem that they were happening so close together, but they wanted to slow them down. So she gave me, I had already an IV port placed. So she gave me some fluids and hoped, that would help, calm, calm them down.
So I'm going to answer that
Um,
question for you.
oh
Your
yeah,
uterus is a
yes,
muscle.
please do.
Okay. And when you're in active labor, your contractions are ideally 2 to 3 minutes apart, lasting 60 to 90 seconds. When they're
Hmm.
1 to 2 minutes apart, it's what we call hypercontracting. So your uterus, which is a muscle, is not getting a break, right? Which has a lot
Mm-hmm.
to do with blood flow to the muscle,
Okay.
right? Like contracting and relaxing and contracting and relaxing and stabilizing blood flow. Now, if she was concerned, it's probably because they saw something with baby A or baby B's heart rate, right? Like
Okay.
just something. So hydrating a uterus, right? Essentially, like
Mhm.
your uterus can hypercontract when you're dehydrated. So adding fluids is something that could help that to try to space them out to 2 to 3 minutes apart. The most important thing that I can share though is that when we put monitors on the outside of the belly, there's no possible way to know how strong the contractions are.
Mhm.
So, the only way you can measure the strength of a contraction is through an IUPC, an intrauterine pressure catheter. And it's a small tube that slides up through the vagina, through the cervix, and then next to the baby's head. And then it actually measures the pressure of the squeeze. So, it's so
Okay.
funny because we have partners that are looking at the screen and they'll be like, "Oh, that's a big one." And we're like, "Well, we don't really know that, It
Mhm.
just they can look different on the monitor. So it may have
Okay.
looked like you were having very strong contractions of too close together and that your uterus wasn't getting that opportunity to take a break. So
Mhm.
I don't know. So they
Oh,
came
well, thank
in.
you for
Yeah,
explaining
you're
that. I
welcome.
didn't
I
know
mean,
that.
I wasn't there, but that's probably the way I would have explained it to you if I was your
Yeah.
doula.
No, that
Um,
makes sense.
which by the way, your doula is not with you at this point, right?
No, she's
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
Nope, we
Okay.
texted her and she's like, "I'll come but I'll come in once labor starts,
Yeah. Okay.
ramping up." So at 3 o'clock, they gave me the 3 in the morning, gave me the IV. At 3:30, they came back and she's like, there's still 1 to 2 minutes apart. She's like, "Are you feeling anything?" And again, I was like, some warmth and cramps, but they were not painful at all. I could
Okay.
sleep through them, talk through them. She's like, "Well, we called your OB and they want to take the cervical out." So they took the cervical out. They checked me. I was 4 centimeters, 80% of face, -1 station at 3:30. They took the cervical
Wow.
out. So
Wow.
after they took it out, it started to become more uncomfortable pretty soon after that. The cramping just got a little more intense. They were happening every 1 to 2 minutes. I could definitely start to feel it then. There was not much break in between. I definitely couldn't sleep through them anymore, and I noticed I was having to try to breathe through them. At this point, my husband was awake. I had to use the bathroom a lot. Which was such a pain because they had to unhook the heart monitor, unhook the monitors from my belly, like follow me with like the, whatever the things, and hold all the wires so I could pee. It was like an ordeal, and I had to go like all the time. Like felt like I had to pee like constantly.
Yeah.
But I guess it was like distracting. Um, so let's see, I tried the birthing ball, but I did not like sitting. I felt a lot of like pressure and warmth in my hips. And so any sitting felt really uncomfortable. So I did not like the birthing ball. So at 4:40, I texted my doula and I told her, like, hey, it's becoming more uncomfortable. I'm having a harder time breathing. I'm having a contraction right now and I'm texting you. So it's not, I knew in my mind if I could talk or, text during them, it was not like super active labor yet, but just let her know like things were starting to get uncomfortable. At that point, I got on my hands and knees and that felt really good. I liked having my hips up and like not on anything. So I was on my
Mhm.
hands and knees and swaying around. And then at 5 a.m., I gave my phone to my husband. So like 20 minutes later, I gave my phone to my husband and was like, you have to text the doula. I can't anymore. Like I can't make a thought in my mind to text her. And I will say at this point, the nurse was still coming back in every 30 minutes from like 3:30 to 5, moving those monitors around. Like they just could not get to solid heart rates readings.
But
So
wait,
then
at what point,
oh yeah,
because you were a planned epidural.
yeah,
So I'm like, I mean, listen, I love what you're doing, but if I was like your doula, when they checked you and you were 4 centimeters and you had this urgency to pee all the time, I probably would have been like epidural, catheter. So then you don't have to worry about peeing and the pain goes away. So what were you just like, I want to just go as far as I can before getting an epidural?
yeah. I mean, I would have rather not gotten one at all. I was really
Yeah.
hoping to be unmedicated. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm having an induction. This could take days.
Yeah.
It's like this induction started at 10 and it's 3 in the morning. Like we still got a long ways to go. So I wasn't even thinking like birth was coming soon.
I am because you were like two, then three, two, then three, then four. When you have to remove
Yes.
Cervidil before 12 hours, it's a tampon looking thing that goes up to your cervix for 12 hours. If you have to take Cervidil out before 12 hours, like you're going pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, it was.
So, what happened
Um,
next? I love that you're intuitively listening to your body, by the way. Remember how we
I
talked
did.
yeah, we talked earlier in the podcast about like the wrongness of the toilet.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
your birth ball was the toilet in that example. It felt like there was
Yes.
a wrongness, but it felt like
Yeah,
a rightness to be on hands and knees.
it did. Yeah. So then at 5:30, my OB came in. It was funny. I was like on my hands and knees swaying. I look over and all of a sudden my OB is like sitting in a chair in there. And I'm like, when did you get in? Like I felt like she just like appeared. But she was just sitting there watching me. And then at 5:30, they decided to break baby A's water. They asked me my permission and they said, let's break baby A's water because then we can get a heart monitor, an internal heart monitor on A, and external on B. And then we'll know for sure we're getting 2 heart rates. And at that point, I'm like, please stop messing with these monitors. That sounds great. Like, I don't want you to mess with monitors on my belly anymore. So I'm like, great, let's do it. So before she broke baby's water, she checked me. I just have written down as 5 centimeters at
Okay.
that point.
Which is really
Um,
far along. 0 to 4 is the longest part of labor.
mhm.
So once you get to 5, anything can happen. I don't know
It
where the
did.
story's going, but I'm like, anything can happen.
So they broke baby's water, and I will say, felt like I was in a hot tub. It was so hot. That water that came like gushing out. I was like, oh my gosh, this feels so good. I was not expecting it to be that warm, but yeah,
Yeah.
I told everyone like, oh, I feel like I'm in a hot tub. And instantly contractions started getting like ramping up, which I knew like in hindsight, like I know when you break a water, that's gonna happen. But in the moment I wasn't thinking that, which I feel like is a good thing because maybe I would have told them no to not break baby's water. But yeah, contractions started getting intense. So I didn't like hands and knees anymore because I couldn't rest in between them. Like my arms were getting tired from being in hands and knees. I couldn't really sit back. I didn't want to lay down and have to get up again. So I just felt like I couldn't rest in that position in between the contractions. So I got up and I stood facing my husband, and I put my arms around his neck, and he kind of had his hands like on my waist, and I just like hung from him. And that's where I was for the rest of my labor. I was just swaying back and forth. And then in between contractions, I could sit on the bed and just rest in between. During the swaying, I remember thinking like low moans, because I could hear myself getting really high, like a high pitched moan. I could feel myself clenched up, and I would just be like, nope, relax, relax, low, relax your face, low moans. And that really helped to focus on that during the contractions. All my pain was in my hips, like my hips, my very lower back, but mostly my hips. I thought pain would be more like in your belly, like where Braxton Hicks are, but yeah, it was my hips where I was feeling it.
It's all about the position of both babies. And you have two in
Mhm.
there and they're in different positions
Mhm.
and they're
Yeah.
hitting different nerve endings. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to know where you're going to feel a contraction because it's all based on fetal positioning. And honestly, it changes every 30 minutes,
Mhm.
too, as the babies rotate and change positions, where you're feeling things will change too. So
Mhm.
I'm still
Just
over here like, where's the epidural?
Okay, quick funny note about laboring while swaying with him. My husband had Pandora playing, and we just had like a free version of Pandora playing like piano music. So the commercials would come on, and anytime a commercial came on, I was like, "Who's talking? What is that noise? Turn it off!" And my husband would be like, "Sorry," and he'd like turn it down, turn it down. And I feel like to this day, I'm like PTSD to Pandora commercials because it just took me out of the zone.
Oh my gosh. I'm so
So
glad
if
you
anyone's
mentioned
using
this.
Pandora, pay for the version without commercials during labor.
Dude, or Spotify or Amazon Music or whatever, right? They all have commercials. Like pay. It's like $10. Well, it's probably more like $17 a month now, but pay for it. That's such a great tip, Laura.
Uh, yeah, I just remember that. I remember being so mad when those commercials came on. So then, let's see, 6:30, my doula arrives.
Mhm.
I started to feel nauseous at this point as I'm swaying on my husband. She's like waving peppermint around. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna throw up. And so then at that point, we're starting to talk about getting an epidural. So I remember I was sitting on the bed. My doula is like fanning me, or no, my husband's fanning me. My doula is like waving peppermint around, and my OB's like, okay, like maybe, someone mentioned like, let's talk about maybe this epidural now. And at this point, I'm like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. Like we were gonna get one anyways. Yeah, let's go ahead and get this epidural. Like I was hitting my point where I'm like, I'm done with this now. Like
Sounds
this
like
isn't fun.
transition.
So she at 6:39, she checks me before we get there. But she asked me, and they were so good about asking for every check. So she asked me 6:39, can we, can I check you before this epidural? I said, sure. She checks me and I'm a 10.
Oh my
So
God.
I was like, oh, okay. Was
And
not expecting that.
and newsflash, everyone, when you have a preterm baby who's got is small, you don't even have to dilate to 10. So the fact that you did dilate to 10
Hmm.
is like you're beyond ready to have a baby.
Yeah. Well, I definitely was beyond ready because when they checked me, I had to like lay down on the bed to be checked. And as soon as she was done checking me, I like had a contraction. At the end of the contraction, I went, oh, and I just felt myself push. And I was like, huh, like I didn't do that. My
Yeah.
whole body just pushed right after contraction.
So
And that's
cool.
when the room got really flurry. The room was like, oh, okay, like we got to go.
That's the
Um,
fetal ejection
It
reflex.
was. I did not do that. At the end of that contraction, I didn't do that, but it felt good. Like, it
Yeah.
felt really good.
Yeah. So cool. Okay, now I am waiting here with bated breath. I'm like, do you get an epidural? Do you deliver a baby? What happens?
So they're like, "All right, we gotta get to the OR. She's starting to push." And they're like, "Don't push, don't push." I'm like, "I'm not pushing. I'm not trying to." So everyone's like getting in scrubs, and I'm just like laying on my side, like clutching the side because I did not want to be laying down during contractions. So I'm like, this isn't the position I want to be in. And I was trying to not like let myself push. Like I wanted to just go with that feeling, but I knew I couldn't yet. So at 6:47, they roll me down to the OR. As soon as we get there, I transfer to the OR table. I remember thinking, "Oh, it's so bright in here. I forgot my sunglasses." Because I remember like hearing on a podcast someone saying like you should bring sunglasses to the OR. It's really bright. So I said that out loud, and they're like, "Oh, we'll dim the lights. It's fine." So they dimmed the lights for
Oh,
me.
that's
So that was really
amazing.
nice. And also, I didn't. I was prepared for there to be a lot of people in the OR, and there wasn't. And it's 6:47, so it's almost a shift change at 7. So I don't know if that was why, but it was only my OB and then like 2 nurses. And then unfortunately my doula could not come to the OR. I knew that ahead of time. We tried advocating like crazy ahead of time and just my OB tried to advocate for it and we just got pushed back.
That's so
We
dumb because you're not even having a
uh,
surgery. You're just pushing a baby out.
I I
Oh,
know.
I'm
It
so
was
angry for you
again
and her and your husband.
Again, though, it was helpful that I advocated before time but ahead of time, because in the moment, I was not caught off guard. I knew what to expect. I knew
Yeah.
this maybe she could come in, but probably not. So it was helpful. It wasn't what I wanted, but I had already kind of come to peace with that
Yeah.
ahead of time.
But what I want, like, let's just say, like, someone comes across this podcast, right? That, like, happens to be an obstetrician or a midwife or working for a big hospital system.
Mhm.
Like, what they need to hear from you, the birthing person, like, share what that felt like to be stripped of that opportunity.
I didn't understand why. I mean, my doula is there to help me birth, and I am going to be birthing. The room is just different, and so I didn't understand why I couldn't have someone there. I didn't want these nurses I don't know to be the ones in there helping me. I wanted like my doula that I build a relationship who could advocate for me for things in the moment that we've talked ahead of time because I wasn't gonna be able to do that. And
Yeah.
again, I was so lucky to have an OB that I really trusted. So that was helpful, but yeah, it was frustrating.
Yeah, I'm so sorry because every person deserves continuous labor
Mhm.
support because that's what
Yes.
data shows is the best thing for the person giving
Mhm.
birth, for the baby, for birth outcomes. And so to rob someone of the opportunity of continuous labor support by not letting a doula go to triage or the operating room or post anesthesia recovery, like if you're running a business, AKA a hospital, like you're not doing it well if you're not
Mhm.
listening to the client, and what
Mhm.
their needs are, or listening to science. And science says continuous labor support. So I'm really sorry to you and your family and to your doula. And hopefully, if we just keep speaking up,
Mhm.
like we'll just keep seeing change, right? Like
Yeah.
in my area, I'm always in the operating room in one particular hospital system. So guess
Mhm.
what? I don't work at the other hospital system.
Mhm.
A
Yeah.
100% of my clients are required to change if they want me to be their doula.
Mhm.
So, okay. So back to 6:47 in the OR, no doula.
Yes.
Do
So they switched me over to the OR table. I could finally like focus on like letting myself push with those urges. Again, I was not making the choice to push, but I could like go with it as it was coming. I think I pushed twice and then I felt the ring of fire and it burned. I remember saying it burns, it burns. My contractions stopped with baby A's head like kind of coming out, but not all the way out. And I was like, why did it stop now? Like I wanted it to keep going. So I had to just sit there like waiting for my next contraction with the, head sort of out.
you wanna know the
And then
answer to that?
sure.
So, I mean, that our bodies are so smart, right? That is your body, that head was stretching your perineum.
Mm,
So
mhm.
maybe you had tearing, but it's to at least reduced trauma to your perineum,
Yeah.
reduced trauma to your labias, reduced trauma to your
Mhm.
clitoris and your urethra, right? Like,
Mhm.
so a 99 out of 100 births, the head will be out or crowning and the contraction ends, the uterus has a
Mhm.
break, right? So again, we know that bleeding is an important thing to control. So your uterus
Mhm.
taking a break, your perineum stretching. So anyway,
Mhm.
okay, keep
Oh,
going.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so then my next contraction comes, and I remember saying, "It's not gonna fit. It's not gonna fit. Like that's not gonna fit." And the nurses were all like, "It's gonna fit. It's gonna come out." And then baby A came out. She was born at 7:08. So I got
Okay.
wheeled down at 6:47, and she was born at 7:08, and it was a girl. I hear my
Okay.
husband saying it. They're like, "Daddy, say what it is," and he's like, "It's a girl." And I heard him, and they're like, "Say it louder." And he's like, "It's a girl." And she just came out red and crying. They put her right up to my chest. She didn't go very far, but they put her up to my chest right away and rubbed her off. And she was 4 pounds 14 ounces. So
Wow.
baby A was just a little thing. She had a wonky foot that was kind of stuck up by her head. When they held her up, her foot was still stuck up there.
That's actually a really good size though was it 35 or 36 weeks?
I was 35 weeks one day.
35 and 1. I mean, that's not too
Hmm.
small. So,
No,
yeah.
and
Okay.
yeah, so they took her away after a little while, and I just kept checking, "Is she okay? Is she okay?" And they're like, "Yep, she's fine. She's doing great." So once I knew baby A was okay, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have another one." Like I totally forgot I had another baby in there. So it took me a minute to like get my attention back. And then I was like, "Oh wait, okay, what's baby B? Is baby B flipped? Is it still head down?" And they're like, "Baby B still head down. The sac was still intact." They're like, "Are you feeling contractions?" I'm like, "No, I had no contractions at all." So we just kind of hung out for a while and waited till contractions came back. And then my OB was like, "Why don't you try, baby B still seems really high up there. Why don't you try pushing a little bit to bring B down?" And so I just gave like a few little pushes. And as I did that, my OB was like, "Oh, I feel like his water is going to break." And like after she said that, it popped and exploded like right in her face, it, like went over her shoulder, like right after
That's
she said that.
awesome.
um,
Ah, that is so
so his water
cool.
broke.
Yes.
So then they were like, "You still feeling contractions?" I'm like, "No." And then I like thought about it and I was like, "You know what? I am feeling some warmth like in my back." And they're like, "Okay, why don't you push when you feel that warmth?" So I didn't feel like I had to push, but when I started feeling that warmth, I like gave a push and the nurses were like, "Oh, good job, good job, good job, keep going." So I'm like, "Okay." So I like took a breath and like gave another push and they're like, "Oh, good job, keep going, keep going." I'm like, "Okay." So I like took another breath and gave another push and he shot out all
Oh
at once.
my goodness. On the third
There was
push.
like
Wow.
no contraction to help me, no ring of fire. He just like shot out. I'm glad I was on the table because I'm pretty sure he just shot out on the table. And that was at 7:36.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay, so about 30 minutes.
28.
Yeah, 28 minutes apart. So,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was a boy.
wow. Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and
How
he was seven
exciting.
pounds.
Okay, I could have guessed that. That's what I was kind of getting at earlier, you know what I mean? When I was like talking and you were talking about siblings and I was like
Yes.
boys are bigger than girls
Yeah.
um
Once I knew A was a girl, I was like, B's a boy. I know it. Like I
yeah.
just knew.
I mean that really is a discrepancy between those two though.
Yeah. And
Basically
to
5
be
pounds and 7 pounds.
35 weeks and 7-pound twin,
Uh-huh.
like, this boy loved being in the uterus, like, he did
Yes.
so good.
Yes. Okay. So this is my favorite part of the twin story that so many people don't know or understand. You did not hear Laura say, I delivered a baby and then I delivered a placenta and then I delivered a baby, right? She delivered a
Yeah.
baby. She delivered a baby. Now talk to me about delivering the placentas.
So, during all my ultrasounds, their placentas were very far apart, and they told me, like, they are not fused, they are not going to fuse, like, they are 2 separate placentas. Um, because I did get my placenta encapsulated and I had to ask, like, what do you do about 2 separate placentas? But then honestly, I don't remember delivering them. I feel like after he came out, I'm trying to even think if they like asked me to push. I really don't remember, but they had fused together. So it was one massive placenta that came out afterwards.
That looks like a butterfly. like with two,
Mhm.
like, I don't know if your encapsulator took pictures, but when they fuse, they
Yes.
typically look like they just have two big elephant ears
Mhm.
or lobes or
Yeah.
whatever. Cool. Well, maybe like, I don't know, maybe ask your husband or something if he remembers the placenta delivery, but most of the time they fuse. I've
Mhm.
never seen two separate placentas in my whole career. I know
Yeah.
that it's possible, but most of the time they fuse. And the
Mhm.
reason is to save your life, essentially. Once a placenta peels
Mhm.
away, your uterus starts bleeding. And
Mhm.
so in this case, they
Oh, okay.
fuse and
Mhm.
it peels away at the same
Mhm.
time. Then your uterus can contract to stop the bleeding. So when the placenta's detached and came out, we
Mhm.
expect the uterus to clamp down and to like
Mhm.
almost like if you're applying pressure on a wound to clamp down so that it reduces your bleeding. But having twins, you're at a pretty high risk for hemorrhage. What
Mhm.
was your bleeding like?
So I actually didn't know that I hemorrhaged till afterwards. They were really good about keeping it calm in there. They did like have to massage my belly over and over again. I wasn't really sure why, but they were just massaging my belly. My OB had to go in and like scoop me out because she wasn't sure if she got all the placenta. And I will say that was painful, but nothing compared to the pain in transition. So I was like, at least I'm not in transition anymore. So to me, that pain was manageable. And I was just so, I mean, having twins that they didn't neither needed NICU time. They both were doing great. They like brought baby A over to me and I was like cuddling with her. So I didn't really know what was going on until we got out of the OR and got back to the room.
Okay.
And then I started feeling bad.
Okay. I was going to say, because when you hemorrhage, like typically you would have some symptoms, Laura. Like,
I had nothing in the OR. I don't know if my
yeah.
adrenaline just took over. And we were in the OR for over an hour after they were born before we got
Okay.
back to the room. But yeah, once I got back to the room, I was starting feeling lightheaded and nauseous, and I threw up a few times. But as soon as they got me some bags of blood, I felt much better.
Okay. So you did have a blood transfusion.
Yeah,
Okay. That's good that they were able to work that quickly. The reason that they
I
were
did.
pushing on your tummy, Laura, it's called a fundal massage. It's actually it's helping contract your
Oh,
uterus.
contract it.
So almost like if you like you're trying to get your muscle to contract or whatever, and you push on it, you
Hmm.
can get it to contract, and or stay contracted by applying pressure. So that's what the fundal massage was for. I'm sorry that you hemorrhaged. It is common, but like what
Hmm.
you saw, they probably gave you medicines like Cytotec, Methergen, I'm naming all different things that are
Hmm.
possibilities. TXA, Pitocin. I mean, there's a lot of
Hmm.
different methods that they can do to prevent your bleeding from being worse than two bags of
Hmm.
transfused blood back to you. Did you start to feel at least a little bit better after the transfusion?
Yeah. Oh, so much better.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, normally with IV fluids and blood leaving your body,
Hmm.
I mean, IV fluids don't leave your body, but fluids and blood leaving your body, getting IV
Yeah.
fluids and blood can make you feel better right away.
Yes.
So, well,
Yeah.
Laura, this was so incredible. It was such an honor to have you in Birth Story Academy and to be able
Yeah.
to kind of be your virtual doula too and teach you along the
Mhm.
way and be part of your
Yes.
story. And we've learned a lot today about twin birth and cardiac conditions.
Mhm.
But before we go, can you just leave the audience with like your best advice and products for any of those
Mhm.
listening that are expecting twins?
Yeah, oh my gosh, my biggest advice is to get them on the same schedule and keep them on the same schedule. So we changed their diapers at the same time. We fed them at the same time. We did everything at the same time. So even if one woke up crying and needed to be fed, we woke up the other one and fed them. So that helped so much. I didn't feel like I was constantly feeding someone because they were both at the same time. And I would like literally feed them at the same time, or if I had help, someone would feed one and I would feed the other. I use the Huckleberry app, and that helped keep track of their feedings and diaper changes, and that helped me. I mean, I feel like when you have one, it's probably hard to keep track of when you have to feed them, but especially with two, and we had to feed them every 2 hours, especially for my baby girl, Hadley. She was so small.
The Huckleberry app is probably the number one most used app by my doula clients. It's pretty incredible.
Yes,
Were you
it's really helpful.
breastfeeding and bottle feeding?
Yeah, Hadley did not breastfeed till maybe 3 or 4 months. She was so tiny and her latch was not coming. Sawyer did, but neither one ever transferred well with milk, so we formula fed, I pumped, we tried breastfeeding, so we did that for about 4 months. So they got a mix of breast milk from what I pumped and formula, and then, yeah, they mostly breastfed for comfort, in my opinion, because they were not transferring much.
Well, that triple feeding is not for the
Yes.
faint, hearted over
No.
here.
I was
So,
really good at checking in the whole time, being like, "I know I can stop whenever I want. I can change we can change course whenever." And I just kind of took it day by day with what felt right. And triple feeding for 4 months felt right. And then I went back to work in the fall and it did not feel right.
oh my, because you're a
I couldn't.
teacher. Yeah, I was like, you're a
Yeah.
teacher. Who takes care of your babies?
They go to an in-home daycare.
Oh, wonderful. It's really hard to
So,
find in-home places where I live. So that's super
yes.
lucky.
Yeah, a woman in my district watches a lot of the teachers' kids. So, really
Oh,
lucky.
oh my gosh, I love it. What grade do you teach?
5th grade.
Oh, what a great grade. They're a little like just
Oh, I
getting a little
love it.
sassy. They're not quite middle schoolers. They're like, top of the world and they're just getting a little sassy. I love it.
Yes.
Um, it's been so wonderful to have you here, Laura. I know that you wrote in and you said you had a favorite baby product though for
Yes.
twins. So what
The
are those
Twin
favorite baby
Z.
products?
Oh, yes. Twin Z pillow was I still use it today, but it's just a little pillow that it's like 2 boppy pillows almost, like, connected.
Okay.
But yeah, if I had a bottle feed 2 babies, I could just stick them both in the pillow and hold their bottles, and today they hold their own bottles, but I just stick them in that pillow to eat, and yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, I love it. And I'll link to it. Do you think you can get it on Amazon or?
Yeah,
Okay.
probably, I'm
All
sure.
right. I'll just find a couple links and I'll put it in the show notes. If you're listening, you can just click and find it. So,
Yes.
Laura, thank you so much for being on the Birth Story podcast and sharing your
Thank you.
story.
My babies just turned 1. Sawyer and Hadley just turned 1 a few days ago. So this was such it's so fun to reflect on their birth a year ago.
It is. I think it's important. Every single year on my kids' birthdays, we watch their
Mhm.
birth videos. And they're
Aw.
7 and almost 9. So my oldest on April 27th, he'll be 9. And like he's now like this year's the first year where he's like, gross, mom. I don't want to watch that. And I'm
Aw.
like, oh, you'll come back to it when you're older. So,
Aw.
well, thank you for
Oh,
being here and happy birthday to Sawyer and Hadley.
well, thank you. It was so fun.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.